Yeah, like this. I wanted to do like this. Oh, what did I say I wanted to do? I wanted to say some things about Yom Kippur. Just don't know where to start. Okay, so we have this thing called Yom Kippur. Such a thing. And we have this thing called, I don't know where it starts or what's the real source for it. I mean, it says a pasuk maybe. Maybe it's what it means. About Slicha. So I didn't do a lot of figuring out for how it starts and exactly, but at least nowadays everyone knows that Yom Kippur, God forgives all your sins. Or some of them, or the ones you did tshuva, or the other ones. I don't figure something. There's something going on. So I have like three questions that I wrote down. Three questions are, what does it mean forgiveness? And most general question, right? Universal question. But like you could even speak about it in a human context, right? What does it mean to forgive someone else? We have even Yom Kippur, such a thing where maybe that's part of the big part of it, maybe it's a small part. We'll figure out the connection, but there's the whole thing with asking mechila or whatever. Asking mechila doesn't say anywhere, but reconciling with your friends, which is what pious means. But basically asking them to forgive you also, like something analogous at least to what God is supposed to do. And we need to figure out what exactly that means. Or at least there's probably a lot of things that it can mean. But then, like I said, then we have the more particular thing which is God forgiving people for sins, which gives you a whole different version of it already, because just to make it a little bit more clear. So we could talk about forgiveness, or forgiveness is a very strong word. Maybe there's slighter, easier words to talk about, like what?
Appeasement.
They had a list. These people had a list of easier words to use. Not easier words, but like words that they say is not forgiveness, but pardoning, having mercy, reconciliation, things like that.
Which word are you trying to translate?
I don't know. I don't. That's we can't get into that resolution.
It's likely to be more sound.
Yeah, there's a lot of
words.
words.
From someone as much as something that's coming from you. Probably the word.
Coming from.
The reason why forgiveness doesn't sound like a good word, because that'd be I'm moichel, then let's say that's coming from me to you.
Right.
But kapara and slicha would probably sound more like something that's coming from you.
That the choite.
Right, the choite
from
itself is bringing out that.
Okay, no, but I actually do want to talk about the thing that the nicht, I don't know how you say, the victim in that, right? That's really what we're interested in some way. That's actually an important distinction, because
let's say
right. So,
and then it would
yeah, I think selech. If slachtik vrech is selech. Kapara in the Tanakh, I could give you a whole thing about what these things mean, but I'm not talking on that level right now.
Saying bechaper is more like for yourself.
No. The point is no. So we have to let's be very clear. What I'm focusing in, and I want to make that clear, is not the concept of tshuva. It's very confused to us, and there were people that deliberately confused this. This is part of the whole history. There were people that very deliberately confused these two things. We have let's say, and I'm just going to say this word just to clarify the thing. We have in the Mishnah, for example, we have. The Mishnah uses the language of kapura, right? Or one of these two things. The avodah Yom Kippur, or the Yom Kippur without the avodah, because we don't have the avodah, unfortunately or fortunately. But that's mechaper. Okay, that's the halachic language, by the way, is always kapura. If someone tells you that it's slicha and kapura and so on, these are to a great extent they're just differences in that context. Some people use this word, some people use that word. And in the Siddur you have all of them, because why not? Siddur likes being flowery language. But in general, just to be, and I'm saying generalizations, you might find some Yitzman Aklal. In general, for the famous three things that say in the Machzah, Slachna, Kaperna, Machalna, right? Those are three things, and there's like whole Mishnah Berurah about which one goes first and which is for the. But anyways, Al Pip Shat, these have three different sources. In the Torah, Lashon Torah, there's only Slicha. There's no Mechila. You could look in the whole Tanakh, you won't find the word Mechila. Mechila is not a term, not a biblical term. Slicha. That's the main biblical term for, I'll say for what? For, I don't know, I would say for forgiveness. For you have it. There's some people talk about how in the Tanakh there's only slicha between God and man. For God there's no slicha ben adam lechavere, but there's also nothing else between lechavere. So that's not a diak. In other words, you don't have the Torah talking about two people reconciling. You have two people paying to each other, and more or less you would say that when it says Hashem says salachti or Hashem yislach la, the implied context is that Ba'ala yislach la like he absolved her of obligation, and God will also absolve your obligation. So there's not this distinction where it's like slicha is a godly attribute. There's not, again, pshat, you could say whatever you want. It's in the Torah, the slicha, it works, it basically means absolving you of obligation or something like that, or of problems that you caused. That's why the Ben Ezra's Medaik in the Parsha of the Egel, that slicha very, very clearly doesn't mean cancelling the sin. Because it says slachna, and then it goes on to give you the punishment. So slicha just means, I'm not going to demand the payment today, or something like that. He calls it the chia. There's a language that he uses that I actually quoted here. Ibn Ezra in no, it's not here. Is arichas af is slicha, but the point of it is not the feeling of arichas af. The point of it is, I'm not going to demand payment right now, or something like that. So, anyways, that's slicha in the Tanakh, in the Chumash. That's where slicha comes from. Slicha is biblical language. There is kapura in the Chumash also, but get to that in a second. Then mechila is just Chazal language for the same thing. Chazal, you never find the word slicha. I mean, unless they're quoting a pasuk. As far as I can tell, in generalizations, they talk about mechila, and in general they talk about ben adam lechavere. But again, it's the same concept that I just discussed. It's mechila is always, you owe me something, I won't demand it. Maybe I could demand tomorrow. I'll demand it. So mechila is man. There's mechila with a kinyan, without a kinyan, whatever. But mechila is just Chazal language for whatever the Torah calls slicha. And you could probably read the Targum, they translate slicha as mechila and so on. It means the same thing. And then you have kapura, and in the Bible you have kapura, which biblically means, well, it literally means something like Rashi says, like cleaning off, like Melashan Chaperes Abayis, like washing off or cleaning off. But it's priestly language. It doesn't matter if you believe in it, it's priestly language. It's generally in the context of, or generally entirely in the context of karbonis, or in the context of chatos. Chatos is lechaper, and so on. Yom Kippurim is lechaper ala mikdash, and so on. That's another whole din. It's not really about it. Pashtus is not talking about offense. You have to remember that there's. Why am I saying this? Okay, there's like this whole theory. There's different theories of chet and what does it mean to sin and so on. What does it mean to reconcile? So this one theory was like the obligation theory, which is like I call it like the monetary, based on the monetary model, you would say, right? Like I owe you money, or I owe you some honor, or whatever it is. Melech shemachal al-kavod, that you don't have to be, you can only be meichel money. It's some kind of obligation story. Like I owe you something, yeah, it's like a contract. And a lot of Tanakh is based on, like there's a whole bris, that's sort of a legal contract, but it's a legal or monetary context. Like that's the kind of story that's going on. That's one story that you have in Tanakh, and a lot of Tanakh works with this story. This chayvus, and you can be meichel the chayv, and chayv could be in this. And that's why mechila could be before the act or after, right? It doesn't really matter. That's why mechila doesn't imply sin; it implies obligation. The word sin, by the way, is totally not a biblical word. It's a Christian word, as far as I know. In other words, the concept I'll talk about in a second. Try to explain the concept. Like there's a sin which is very different category of thing than obligation. There's obligations, like the Mishnah talks about. They're the same category of things. You owe certain things to God, you owe certain things to your fellow man, and you can, God could say, you don't owe me this, or meichel you owe it, right? Meichel doesn't have to be after a chet, right? Actually, meichel you melech shemachal kavod, like I deserve a certain, it's deserve, right? I deserve a certain honor, right? You're not allowed to sit in my place, I'll let you sit in my place, or something like that. So that's mechila. I absolve you from the obligation or from that I deserve. And same thing, God, that's why there's Hashem koydem achet, by the way. He can absolve you, in some sense God deserves infinite honor, but he doesn't demand that. He demands a limited amount of honor, or a limited amount of obligation per whatever. The mitzvah already is a slicha, in the sense of not demanding infinite honor. I think that's the pshat of Hashem koydem achet, midas harachma, or the slicha, that's koydem achet. And then there's Achra Chet. So once you have after you have a Chet, you have some kind of another obligation, like you have to make it up or you owe something. So again, there's a slicha. You could have slicha for that. Then so that's one story, like one whole narrative of what it means to have Chet and Shiva. Then there's another whole story, which is the priestly story, and it's in Sefer Vayikra, mostly only in Sefer Vayikra, Vayikra and Bamidbar, and Shema is like no, it's only in only in Vayikra and Bamidbar, where mostly places that are identified as the priestly stories, but again doesn't matter. Point is, there is a story of what the researchers call a defilement or pollution. So it's a pollution theory of sin, and it's a theory based on Ashras Ashchina, theory based on a whole totally the Mekabulim are gonna take this kind of story. So the first story is like the Pshat story, and the Mekabulim take this story, and they both have sources, very real sources in the Tanakh. And this story, and if you read Yechezkel, you can see this theory, and so on. It's a theory where, like Sefer Vayikra says, God is present, or whatever Sheikhan exactly means, somehow lives among us in his Mikdash, of course, and for the Mikdash to work, not for God to be there, or the proper way for him to be there, is it needs to be clean. There needs to be some kind of, I think cleanliness is a correct term, or tahara or kedusha, get to different definitions, but the main thing is tahara, or kapura. It needs to be clean enough for him, and then there's a whole hierarchy of different levels of things that pollute it, that make it dirty, like tima. That's why in Sefer Vayikra, almost every sin is called tima. And not only that, like the Rambam is very worried about, but even killing someone is metame esoretz, right? And if you arise, I'm metame esoretz. And what's mean metame esoretz? It causes the shechina to go away. In a sense, it's imagined at least as like dirt, like you can't be in a dirty place. So if you make it dirty, and there's ways of making it dirty, there's ritual ways, like it can become dirty by murder, it can become dirty by ervet, it can become dirty in more general by any chet, or by eating bachulas aseres, shemetama, and so on. All these things that make it dirty, so to speak, or metama, and they cause God to go away. And of course, he stays somehow. But the point is that's not proper, so therefore you need to clean it. And in general, the idea of Yom Kippur, the pshat of Yom Kippur, by the way, is totally about this. Kapura is l'chapre ala mikdash, and in the sense that the mikdash itself gets dirty somehow, which is improper for the shechina, and it needs to be clean. So once you sort of all year the dirt accumulates, even without doing something specifically bad, the kapura of Yom Kippur al Pshat, and the Chazal argue with this. Chazal say that the halacha is also more or less agrees with this pshat. Tumas besam and api halacha and api like the halacha of Votzim Kippurim, not the halacha of the first half of Masechet Sima, not the halacha of that last blot, which start talking about human sins. The halacha of the rest of Masechet Sima is very clearly about Mikdash problems. So Tumas Mikdash and so on. And maybe in general, every chet is metama the mikdash in some metaphorical sense. And once a year, you do this whole tekes of chatas, basically chatas, and they see that the Sar Mashlech is very similar to all chatas chetzanias, chatas paradima is very similar to it, and chatas of the Melim did the same thing. The chatas of Parel Noshal, they all do they all do similar things, which is assuming that there's some big sin or big chet that Thomas makes, or it's just a yearly thing, and it needs to be cleaned, and blood is considered the azuz dam ala parechas, and the mizbeach pnimi dam is always a purifying thing, although you would think about the opposite, but the Bible always thinks of blood as a purifying thing, like it's a detergent kind of thing. That's what they call it, Milgram, the Bible researchers. And the blood is just like the paradima. You throw a little bit. It's not blood, but it's like something that came out of the blood, or the paradima and so on. It purifies the mikdash, and that's allows God to continue dwelling within us. That's kapura. Okay, that's the second biblical theory of tshuva. That's not really tshuva.
Metaphorically, everything's based on. You mean like Averis for the klal, let's say, and call it that, and call it in the base of Mikdash?
Yeah, like we could talk about something. So you can elaborate this theory in different ways, but the idea would be something like there's Hashem Sheichel B'Sech Eretz Yisrael, and if you do mostly Arayis and Ratzicha are metamadat, so we can't, and then you're going to be Tokias Chameretz because the land will not work. The Shechina will not work. Then there's there's more levels of Kaddish, like in Yerushalayim and in Har HaBayis and so on. And like, the biggest sin goes up until the Kodesh HaKadoshim. That's why only Yom Kippur, you have to, it literally says, by the way, it says, V'chipper al HaKodesh b'timas b'nei Yisrael. It does not say V'chipper al timas b'nei Yisrael and b'nei HaKodesh. It says V'chipper al HaKodesh b'timas b'nei Yisrael, which means that in some sense, maybe some sins, or maybe in some level, there's some chet, groise chet, or maybe there's a kind of chet that metamet, like as if the Oren became tameh, or the Kodesh, the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and therefore you spray some blood on the. By the way, in the most literal sense, you spray blood on God. That's what it says. It goes into the Kodesh HaKadoshim where God is, or whatever Shechina is representation, and he sort of purifies that the Shechina, and that allows it to continue to work. So it's like. The Beis Mikdash itself sort of is considered to become Duma. And Yecheskel talks about Tameas Mikdash is language of Yecheskel, and that's causes the Golus according to him and so on. That's a whole different theory. It's totally not a theory of obligation. Like no Litvak would understand what this is all about. No Litvak in the sense of like modern people that think of ethics as always having to do with obligations in some way. What a human is to do. It's totally a theory of, if you want to like connect it to some kind of, it's really a theory of theology that only works with the God. Like it's a totally theological way of understanding everything, and that's why in Sefer Vayikra, even like that, even Chatum Shbenem Lachavayri are considered to in some way cause God to be not comfortable in like that's how I would say he's not comfortable in this kind of space. Even Chatum that we would totally not like, you would say okay Timivatar or something, maybe it's only a ritual problem with like the Mikdash is not happy with that, but actually this very clearly Sefer Vayikra includes Chatam Shbedim Lachavayri, Chatam, like I said, Arayis, you could sort of understand, but it's really a Chatam Lachavayri. In very human sense, they include in the problem of being Metama the Mikdash, or defiling, like being Mechal, that's Mechil Hashem really, but Chazal make it mean something else, but Chilla Mikdash or Chilla Kodesh, that's like totally, the only like sort of people that understand this is like, again, like Mekabalim, or people that talk about purification, like people that sometimes Chassidim talk about like you need to purify yourself in order to be worthy to access God, or things like that. That sort of makes sense. Like you would talk about and not in a Rambam way, right? Like not in a Rambam mystish way where just by being a good person you access God, but being a good person includes sometimes people make it levels, but actually, like I'm saying, Sefer doesn't have levels. Just all are just everything is theological problems. Like you need to be clear enough or pure enough in order to access God. So there's people that have this kind of theory. Like the Mekabalim mostly have this theory, and then the Zohar explicitly says that all Chatam are really Metama. It's totally opposite of the Rambam. The Rambam says that Tema is also just a moral problem and some whatever, it reinterprets Tema. But they would say just the opposite, that everything is really a kind of Tema. And these are psikim, both of these ways are psikim. Like it's not even anyways, that's I don't know where I got to this. This is Hagdama Lagdama. That's Kapura. And then interestingly, back to Chazal, in Chazal we talk about Kapura V'em Kapirim. They always talk about the language of Kapura. And that's again the Kodshim language. And so the Kodshim we always have, and their halacha, totally halacha. There's no theology in the whole set of Kodshim as far as I know. It's very much legal interpretation of these mitzvahs, including the mitzvah of Yom Kippur, which is mostly Yom, mostly Kodshim, and they understand Yom Kippur, and maybe even without the Avodah, but as having some kind of, like there's a din. Kippur is a din, and actually has a halachic ramification. It's not like a theory that you have to believe. I mean, since it's not a Chassidish Torah, it's a halacha Torah. Like there's Hashem Tole, you can bring after Yom Kippur, and even other some Dianim Sechtes, I forgot where, about after Yom Kippur, if you bring us the carbon still, because Yom Kippur was mechaper. Like that's halacha. There's a gather which things yes, which things not. So it's like literally halacha. And then they talk about vidya, which was again vidya also comes from the carbonis. I mean, both from the carbon of, according to their interpretation of the carbon and old carbonis maybe about carbon chatas and so on, and from the carbon of the vidya of the kohen gadol of the Seder Mishtalech. So that's all halacha. So that's already a third theory, like halacha, but halacha doesn't mean anything. The only way to make sense of it is to make it into like the cleaning thing.
Is it if the stream becomes white?
Yeah,
but
that's a sign. That's a sign of the halacha of the thing working, like of the machine working.
Do it correctly,
yeah,
and it doesn't automatically do that. That's the one exception. After the whole process,
I wonder.
Maybe it didn't work. Like,
okay, that's.
Like, I think Shimon it always worked by.
Yeah. I know. I don't know. I wonder what they actually think that means. It's a good comment. I don't know what they think that means. Like if it didn't work, what has to work? Like, wasn't Mechavan the Yichud correctly, or they didn't Shuvah correctly? Does that what it says? Or maybe it actually means he didn't like the briska, like the lulav wasn't green enough. Maybe it really means that.
I don't think it's hard to find. That's
No,
what it means.
can't be.
It's very sure to say the word exam. Someone probably would say.
There must be someone that says that.
Sorry.
Maybe it just means it didn't spritz. Like when he spritzed on the corner, it wasn't the corner. It was like too much on the. I don't know. I hear. Yeah, okay, you could find that. Okay, but that's why I said that I think the sense of the halacha has to be the sense of like, at least the purification sense makes more sense with that. No, even chalik kapara, like halacha. So you've got yisurim, then, and so on. But I would say that that's why probably the halacha presumes some kind of a theological sense of, and that's why it's very important. I think this is a very general comment. It seems like that there's like these, as I was saying, you have these three theories of there are really three theories of virtue, like three theories of what it means to be a good human or a good Jew, which is the same thing, right? In Chazal is very clear the same thing. By the way, and this is a very weird place where they, I mean, you could always they make some chettel, but they don't seem to have the concept that I wanted to say. That's really what this is an old type. That I wrote down for today. I wanted to say that there's sin, right? So in later medieval Christian theology, they developed a very clear distinction between human virtues and theological virtues, right? And the sense where you could be a bad person but not a sinful person. And these are two totally distinct things. Like sin, well, not sure what exactly it means. I mean, basically has to do with God, but also has to do with God in the real sense, in the sense that only God could help you with it. That's why they need grace and all of that. And versus like what they sort of the classical virtues, which are just basically temperance and courage and whatever, being a good person. Not only being a good person, more complicated than that, but like entirely human goods or human virtues. And according to that, you would like separate, and very clearly, like if you're a Christian, you would separate, and again, like almost all, at least all Western Christians would separate between like mechila, like you could have like the first thing that I said, right? You could talk about like I have obligation towards you and you forgive me or reconcile and so on, versus some kind of deeper level which might even exist between two people, but definitely between humans and God, where they would say it doesn't really make sense for reconciliation to happen. It's impossible because the problem, or really what they identify as sin, is really just the human will not being aligned automatically with God, or some really basic thing, like basic problem that they identify with humanity, which is really the sin. It's impossible for a human to really achieve God, to really have hope or faith and charity and all these theological virtues, and you could only have it by grace, or basically by Christ dying on the cross. But even if you abstract that, you can only have it by an act of God. Very clear. This is a very clear distinction. But what it causes not only the story with you need someone to die for you and so on. The more clear thing is that they end up a very clear distinction between like what it is to be a good guy and in the Jewish language, which is why I'm saying it doesn't really make sense in Jewish context. What it means to be a good guy and what it means to be a good, in other words, to be a good person in this world, we would say, to achieve perfection of the world, of Hanikra Ilam Hazeh, and to achieve eternal perfection, right? For Yenavelt, to save your soul, right? Or save your body and save your soul.
That's why Kierkegaard's all...
With? Yes, again, wait, right. Yes. The Christian, there's no Christian that agrees, and at least Augustinian Christianity, right? Again, there's no, anyone following Augustine's line of Christianity doesn't believe that you could have the second Shlemus without God. Doesn't really, it's not a human thing. It's not possible.
They're not connected, basically.
Right. Again, that doesn't entirely match onto these two. That's what I'm saying. This is the Arab Muslim conception, and it's very interesting, and I'm saying this just because I'm not here to like fight with anyone. I'm just saying this to clarify this thing we talk about forgiveness and so on, because and I think that even the people that don't talk about in this lens, right, they wouldn't talk about like a goy and a yid. There's almost no. It doesn't even match, like, there's no Jewish, and I talked about this earlier in another class, but like no Jewish person that would say, I mean, people do say that, but I think that philosophically, there's no Jewish philosopher that says that, let's say like this, and that's enough for me, because philosophers are just people that articulate in many senses what other people believe already, although the other people then come back and say, no, I don't believe that, but they still believe that. There's no Jewish philosopher that I know that defends the opinion that you can't get to Olam Haba without mitzvahs, for example, which is the Jewish analogy of something, an act of God, which is not explicable or achievable by human work or human reason, really. Really nobody says that. Of course, there are people that say that you can't understand God with human power alone. Actually, those people tend to say that you never will. See, this is a very big difference between, again, in general, there's people that say God is not understandable, not within human grasp of human reason, and therefore the only way to get to God is by theurgy, by mitzvahs. This is very, like Iamblichus says the same thing. And that's a Jewish position. There's such Jewish positions, and the Kuzris are more or less in that position. And there's a whole tradition that says, again, then nobody defines themselves clear enough, but sort of seems to say things like this. But there's a very big difference. Because none of them, from this both two sides, number one, none of them would say that this is, because we sinned, right? So one of the big Christian theories, and literally, people were excommunicated for saying that we could prove God, or we could get to God by human reason, because that's denying original sin. Because original sin was taken to mean, or one of the things was taken to mean that human reason is inherently flawed, and therefore, at least relative to God, right? Again, it doesn't have to be flawed relative to knowing math and so on, but it needs to be relatively flawed relative to touching God. And therefore, no Christian, or again, almost none of them believe that it's possible to even know God by reason alone. And this is they ascribe to something that we did wrong, or that the Marishan did wrong, whoever. It might have been possible, and that's why, in many senses, they very much have this idea of, even Aquinas talks about beatific vision, the idea of that by God's grace you can know God. So this becomes a problem even for Christian negative theologians, where they have to say that that's only a lot of them have to say that that's only as far as human reason is concerned. But if God wants, because that gets into this problem, if God wants, can He let you know Him? I don't think there's a Jewish analogy to this. Again, there's people that say things like this, Eucharist fine, but this is not the story that we have. We don't have the story that not being able to achieve God is a failing, it's a sin. It's not a sin. I mean, you could call it a sin, but like al-derech mishal, it's not a sin. There's nothing wrong with that. It's maybe a limitation of human reason, maybe, but that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, and it's a good thing. Arizal would say it's a symptom. It's good, whatever. It's a good thing. It's not a fall, and at least that part. I don't know of any. I'm not thinking. I don't know of anyone that says this in Judaism, that like the fact that we can't know God by our own power is because of Chet HaBerishin or something like that. People say things that are similar to that, but not in the real sense. Not like this.
Theology more natural for Christianity, though. Right?
What?
That makes negative theology more natural.
No, the opposite. Because on the other side, whoever does say that doesn't say that you will in Olam Haba understand God.
Right.
Because God will make a miracle and make that work.
I don't think I found.
Again, they have this story. That's what I'm trying to say. The Jewish, and this is important for the Rambam at least. The Rambam, for example, and all the Muslim theologians that he follows, they identify the human good, the Torah's good, whatever the Torah is after, whatever it is the goal of the Torah, the being a human according to the Torah, with the same thing that the philosophers are after. Okay, which for him is the Aristotelian, somewhat Platonized philosophy. Okay, but that whatever they think is good, both in the sense of this world, right, creating a good society and creating good people in that society and getting them closer to the second completion, right, to knowing God and so on, to perfection. All these things, which is what the philosophers identify as the goal. That's the same thing which the Torah is after, and very importantly, the Torah doesn't change the goal; it changes the way there. I think very clearly for the Rambam, and it might sometimes make it more difficult. Very clearly for the Rambam, and again, I don't know anyone that explicitly denies this. This is where you could find always someone, but I don't know anyone that explicitly denies. In other words, if Aristotle or anyone or Plato would come and say humans are here to what was Plato's language? To imitate God as far as humanly possible. Very nice statement. And they would say, yeah, that's what we're about. Any McKibble would say, yeah, of course, that's what we're about. Imitating God as far as humanly possible. That sentence makes totally sense. That's what Plato said. Be like God, not like God, because you can't be like God. Like it says, almost like God, okay? Almost as like God. Almost all Jewish people, and for various values of what being like God and what possible and so on, they all agree to this statement No Christian agrees to this statement. Now, what I'm just saying, using Christianity to clarify this point. What this means is that then you ask him, okay, what does it mean to be a Yid? Well, what's the point of the Torah? So the Rambam would generally tell you something like, without the Torah, I don't have any quote for you to tell him that he says this, but I think that's what he would say. So something like, without the Torah, there would be like one of them in 10 generations, or one Sakwaris in 10 generations to get there. With the Torah, there's like one in every city. I think it would say something like that, which is great because it's 10,000% more. Still not most people, but it's a lot more people.
It's appropriate to come out of Avram for that reason.
Yeah, and his whole thing is that Avram Avinu actually started this, and then Moshe Rabbeinu made it better, and so on, or whatever God. But if that would be his basic story. But what I'm interested in here is that the Torah doesn't change the goal, even not the basic ways of getting to that goal. In the sense of, you need to start from what we call moral perfection, from what he calls the first perfection. You need to first have a healthy body, and then you have to have a healthy midas, whatever virtues. You need to, and so on, and then you could have a healthy mind, and then you could think, and then you could get to the tachlis. You get to Adam Hab. That's this basic story. Is the same story for everyone. Now there are better or worse ways, or easier and harder ways, or more popular and less popularizable ways of doing this. And the Torah is one of the great ways. That's what the Rambam's language. Whatever. He calls it eitzes. What?
Maybe the Abbas when came to our saying that.
Yeah, of course.
They did the same thing as we did.
Yeah, he definitely understands it that way. And it's not him, other people.
That the Abbas when came to our cool, which means that once we have the Torah, we don't change what we're doing. They did it without it, basically.
Yeah. The Rambam, I don't remember the Rambam talking about it, but people in his line definitely talk about it and say, "Well, you're crazy." It doesn't mean that Rambam did that after Tafshil. That means that whatever Tafshil is for, he did. No, and that's the Chassidim all go on this, accept this reasoning and so on.
Litvaks hold anything.
Yeah,
The
Litvaks have a problem. No, I'll talk about it in a second. No, because they have a different thing. Because they're worried that, okay, not for now. Point is, what I'm interested in is that he identifies that there's only like there's only one thing which is good. And that's why Chassidim Yisraelim, it's probably harder to be a Chassidim Yisraelim than to be a Chassid not to Yisraelim, just because he doesn't have these eitzes. That's the Rambam get this language, the Zohar has the same language of mitzvahs being eitzes, itin. The Zohar just translated it to Aramaic, but the Rambam's language is eitzes merachak, and the ends of Hilchas, I quoted it in my booklet, I don't remember. Kol HaTorah Kol eitzes merachak from this God's, what he calls almas hachesed, God's gracious trickery, something like that, of getting people to the truth easier in according to what they could. That's the Rambam's theory, and I don't know of anyone that really explicitly denies this theory. Because you could say always that, but not in this explicit way, and not in the explicit way that you have in Christianity. All the Christians, and every single one of them, unless if you deny this, you're basically not an Orthodox Christian, at least for Western Christianity. No Pope would even give a Chatzias comment to your book. And they all have to say that there's no such a thing as imitating God as far as humanly possible. It's impossible humanly to imitate God. It's possible by the grace of God to imitate God or to achieve what we're talking about now, reconciliation with God and so on. But that's only by the grace of God and only because historically this Jesus character existed and so on, and was the personification of the second person of the Trinity and blah, 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 blah. But the point of, even if you take out the history, which you can't do by the way, but also a very important chilek, right? Like if there's no Christian theory of we don't realize this. I know that I don't know. I already said this. Okay. Because the point is, I'm not one of these people that are chasing Christians. I think most of the people chasing Christians are chasing the wrong things. Because when you actually read Christian theology, you see that they're busy with extremely different problems than we have. Even everyone, basically. There's no Christian theory of which basically says, and if you interpret it in this way, basically says there could be kaim goy kol. And Chazal talk about mitzvahs she'ilei, and then they say there's some mitzvahs that are not, but they're not the mitzvah not ma'akev. At least because you can get to them if we say chesidim Yisraelim, which means you don't need those mitzvahs. But more basically, what it means that whatever the Torah is after is whatever everyone else is after, and it also means that there are no theological virtues that are distinct from human virtues or whatever they call them, regular virtues. There are just regular virtues. And those are the theological virtues also. Those will allow you to access God. And this means that there's no category of sin which is distinct from whatever category of bad person you have. Just in English, you have the same one and think. Now you could, of course, you could have a divine command theory of sin, which is what Chazal seem to have most of the time, which says like something like sin is just doing what God doesn't like. Okay, but of course they believe that human minds can access that, at least in some level, right? Because God killed Saddam without giving them any mitzvahs and so on, right? Just everyone knows you don't kill. You give tuchnas zachem. It's not like they're not very worried about how exactly we figure out the correct morality. Whatever it is, everyone knows, and God will be mad, and same and so on. You could. People say this. But this is already trying to graft things. I honestly think that. I don't know. I'm not going to get into this. You might even say something like the best way, the really best way is to do Tarag mitzvahs, and so on. But so it's b'diavad, so it's not as good. You don't even have to. The main point that I'm trying to say is that they don't seem to assume a different kind of sin or a different kind of human problem, whatever the bad thing, whatever we're trying to get away from on Yom Kippur. There isn't like a separate one that if not for the Torah wouldn't know about it even. That's really, in some sense you have to know about it before, but like there isn't any sense in which, that's why I'm just using this, it's not the correct definition, but there's no sense in which before Matan Torah everyone went to Gehenna, which is the basic Christian sense. You can't be a Christian without believing that before Jesus came around, everyone was going to hell. You could find some doichik teritzim would say, there's doichik teritzim, but this is the basic story, right? This is not the basic Jewish story. The Nefesh HaChaim tries that's such a story, but even he doesn't get that in anywhere close to that. All he says is that like sort of the idea solidified in the Torah. That's the Nefesh HaChaim's theory. Like if it was like more watery, you could have been kind of Torah with Yaakov Vini's Maklis and so on, and now you can't. But it's like a solidification of a certain abstract concept. He doesn't have it like Yaakov Vini didn't go to Gan Eden, right? It's very different. No Christians say, well, some people, again, there's like heterodox Christians that say things like this, but standard Christianity is not that. Nobody would say like there's the idea of Jesus and then it became flesh. No, there was no idea. There was an idea, but however exactly you understand the story, it had to happen in history, and the redemption of humans has to happen through this actual thing.
So we read, therefore, expect certain things before Matan Torah. Let's say, for example, certain arise. Again, like of course
right.
you had these concepts.
And not only that, we basically accept all that arise. See, that's the funny thing. If you read Parshas Achrei, and the Ramban has a theory about this, which tries to somewhat make it push it to the other side. But if you read Parshas Achrei, as Achsama says, the Canaanim, they married their aunts or whatever. That's what he says. It doesn't make any distinction between normal arayos and like very halachic arayos that he has over there. He seems to think that it's just an elaboration, and we can get into these details, but he doesn't even make that distinction. You see, in Chumash literally says, these are the things that the Canaanim did. And it gives you a list of 36 arayos. whatever the number is. It doesn't say they did the Eshesesh, but they didn't do the others. Now, you could still argue that distinction is true, but if that distinction is true, it's true. That's the important thing. If it's true, it's true in halacha also. I think that there's halachas that we're not. The Gemara says this, Mi'ah Kamidi, and there's a lot of theory about this in halacha. But in general, I would say this, that there's some halachas that are mitzvah in the sense of even in halacha there are things that are real and there are things that are just like details, which happen to be the halacha, but they're not as bad as like whatever. Sometimes the halacha doesn't do that, but that's very legal story. It's not relevant. Point is, that's the point. So the point is that's why I don't think that there's really a different kind of slicha, and that's why I think that. So, for example, and this is what we'll get somewhere more simple. But for example, it seems like we don't find a theory that says that I'll give you something. We don't find a theory that says that that forgiveness is a godly thing to do. And there's a lot of achrarim that say this. They say this vart, like slicha doesn't say in the Torah only for God. That's a Christian vart. That's very Christian vart, and I think that not because I'm not worried about being too Christian. I'm just think that this is not. We don't have this definition because the main reason why Christians get to this vart is because they think that there are chatoim that are only chatoim because they're godly kind of problems. In other words, theological. There's a difference between sin and whatever the other word is. Just being a bad person. Very offense or whatever. Very big difference. And I don't see this difference anywhere. We could talk about Chatad Madla Chavara, but they're all in the same category. And which also means that if there's Slicha, there could be the same kind of slicha b'nei Chavari as there is b'nei Makkah. I don't see the reason to make a real distinction. And now we have to figure out what it is. But it doesn't seem to be. In other words, they don't have a word. I'll say something like this. I'll give you a source for this thought that I have. Let's stop making stuff up. Let's start reading something. So over here, I printed my Rambam. So, so the Rambam does this, and Halach Tezvav. And here, I'll give it to you. I'll find my own. Wherever. The Rambam, he gives us this story. If you think of just a good example, a good proof for what I'm saying now. I don't know why I'm saying it. I was trying to be more organized. But it's a good proof for this idea that I'm saying that it's true that, in other words, there's a Christian story that goes like this. According to reason, according to natural law, so to speak, it wouldn't be a good thing to be moichel anyone. You shouldn't forgive anyone. You killed my brother. I'm gonna do the and kill your brother, whatever. The guy Adam, I'll kill you. Very normal. They always say the Old Testament seems to approve of this, and I still approve of it somewhat. Whatever, you can go to the legal system, it doesn't change much. Still the same point. And then came Jesus and says, no, God could survive that too, something like that. He teaches you to, and since they want to imitate God, and since Christian being graceful or being forgiving is really trying to imitate whatever God does by forgiving the world, which is impossible. See, it's like a lot of this is like, and I'm not doing anti-Christian polemic here, but a lot of this is like you make the bar so high that then you need to invent such a crazy antidote for it. You make it impossible to be good because we can't even know anything because we're so whatever, because we ate that apple once. And then, in order to be moichel on that, we have to invent something even greater than that, which is literally have to get God killed somehow to help us with that. But the point is, you need to have something really great. By the way, you could read a lot of mitzvahs from that have the same logic.
Do you know, like grace? That the grace of the forgiveness is like.
It must be so overwhelming. Yeah, amazing grace, like the song says.
But that's why you shouldn't go be Gael down, because it's like you should overcome that thing.
Yeah.
We would say, let's say we would say that you should actually go kill him. It's actually pretty reasonable.
I don't know about that. So again, it might be reasonable. The point is, the point is, and also it says Farish after Parshas Eglarif v'nechaper lehem Adam, just by doing this little thing of, or whatever, however it works. I don't have some theory of what the point of it is, but whatever it is, we kill this egla and we make a big achroza. It wasn't our fault. Whatever, we do some kind of tshuva, whatever the ritual prescribes, and then it's fine. This v'nechaper lehem Adam or v'nislach la is a very good thing, because it tells you there's a certain demand. Yeah, you have a certain kind of obligation or a certain kind of pollution, whichever theory, and it can be cleaned. Both of these things are very basic. Now you could say that you could think of it more theologically or more naturally. That's not the point. But the point is that they're reasonable demands that have reasonable answers. And I think that this Gandhi quote, the very famous Gandhi quote, is very dumb. Eye for an eye until the world is blind. That's stupid. The whole idea of an eye for a blind was be proportionate. You could take one eye, I'll take one, not more than that. That guy can't go back. That will be injustice again, right? The whole idea there's a balance. Everyone is supposed to have two eyes. Now I got one eye less, so you're going to have one eye less, and that's all. It stops there. Why would it continue? There's no reason for it to continue. I don't even get the kasha. Why would it get? Okay, I'm not talking about this. I'm just showing you that I don't know where it's kind of thinking it comes from. If they come wait, now I kill everyone's eyes. No, one guy, right? Very simple. So powerful, even twice. There's always a limit. But the point is, it's about justice. It's not about retribution. Just the kind of justice that the Torah thinks of. But anyways, the point is more generally in ethical sense. There is some kind of demand to being a perfect human, which is a lot. It's very hard to get to it, but it's possible. If it wouldn't be possible, that's the Rambam's whole thing, really. In Bechira, right? He needs to be possible in order to make sense about talk about it. Right? Not because he's looking for responsibility, right? Which people think. Not looking for a reason to be able to give you a punishment because it was your fault, because you have Bechira. He's looking for it to be possible to, I spoke about this, to be better. And it's possible, and if you didn't do it, so now it's still possible. Now it's Shiva is about that. If you have an impossible demand, which is V'yisam Kalehim, anyways, you get an impossible demand, and then it's impossible to do, then you need God to save you. But there's no reason don't make such big kashas, then you won't need such a big teretz. That's the basic difference, and I think. And again, I don't know that, and I think a lot of Misasvarim seem to say these things. Like, the Gemara says something like this, and not that. But a lot of Misasvarim seem to say things like, they all have this thing of making impossible demands, and then you need like Menachem Breslev, they need to go to Uman because he has impossible demands on people, or he assumes that there is halachas or whatever. It's very same dynamic. I mean, sometimes books that talk about pnimius, always make like you should love God and not think of anything about Him, and then like there's no Gehenna that's big enough for you, and you basically need to rely on grace. There's a lot of such logic in Chassidish books and so on. And yeah, I don't know. There must be some truth in it, but it doesn't seem to be what's going on in any of the. But in the point, I would say something. Even those people don't say that the definition of what you need to do is impossible. Like even if you'd be a tzaddik gomer, it would be impossible. It happens to be most people are not. So, someone even Reb Nachman, which managed to be a tzaddik. Very big difference. He doesn't have to be God. No, I mean, it's serious. Even the Breslev, like this guy managed, and now he's going to save the rest of us. Okay, the Jesus guys don't have that because he was literally a God, right? It's not possible for anyone. If God himself, then okay, he's God. But that's a very big difference. Even people that sounds like I was saying that Breslev has Christianity, but they're very different. They're still very Jewish in the sense that there's one tzaddik. Okay, one, that's enough. So it's, in theory, it's bikaron. In principle, it's possible to be a tzaddik. That's a very big. That's a huge difference. Or there's like Gemara says, but that's just saying, okay, humans have a lot of problems. It's hard, and God has to help you. But it's not defining the good by something that's impossible. Only if God helps you, right? Not saying the Shire of Gan Eden is so tall you need God to jump you over, or something like that, which is the Christian image or something like that. And the same thing is about Slicha, and if you read, so that's what I wanted to read you. So the Rambam talks, and this is quoting Gemara, but whatever, we can read it in the Rambam. But he says something like this, right? He talks about in Perek, where is it? Perek Bez, right? Talks about the chiyuv of being mefayis chavera, and then there's this halachat ezvav. It's my number halachat ezvav in the Rambam's. It's a different number. It says you should not be achzori, right? Well, sounds like a hard demand. And then he starts to give you chizik. How could you do this? He says, that's a Jewish thing. And he quotes this Gevonim story, which it says, this is actually a very radical thing, because the Gemara literally says that we decided that they're not Jewish because they don't have good midas. Right, basically. Since they're not Bashanim, they're not. So, like, genetically they might be, or they might have been misguided with Kusher Agir, but since they're acting Goyish, what's mean acting Goyish? This is very radical, because it says, like for the B'sil Salanta, what does it mean to act Goyish? It doesn't mean not to put on tefillin. You would think, this is what I'm getting at, you would think that it's the opposite, right? You would think every Goy has to be a mensch, right? A mensch is a mensch. What the Marishan, like you say. You have to be a mensch, you have to be Avdinim, you have to have, and so on, right? So if you're not a mensch, a Yid has to put on tefillin, like Posh Yisrael Begifim. This the Gemara has this language. Posh Yisrael, this is a Yiddish echet. If you're not putting on tefillin, that's a Yid, you're a Yid, you're a schlechte Yid, you're not a schlechte Goy, because the Goy doesn't have to put on tefillin, right? And then there's this story with these Gevonim that since they killed Shaul, they demanded Shaul's children to be killed. They said that we decided they're not Yidden. So after that story, no more. We're not part of us. Why? We're not like this. Jews, we're Moichel. You people don't have the basics. Not because they all put on tefillin, they all went to the mikveh and did whatever it is that you have to. And not only that, and like probably like the Gemara says about the Ketim, right? They're probably more makbid about going to the mikveh than the Yidden. Kol mitzvah zikben, whatever. Very frum. I ate gefilte fish every Shabbos. But it didn't help because they're not Moichel, this guy that killed them. I mean, it was a serious thing, right? It caused a bunch of them to be killed.
Similar to what we call sodomy. What do we call sodomy?
Yeah, exactly. Midas Adayim is being a guy. That's the biggest guy you could be.
Yeah.
A Midas Adayim, like Stam Zen Henem Zelechaz, Stam don't let me Stam Erush.
Our sodom is Mahamish, not whatever.
So, exactly. Because for them, that's like, you could think about it, maybe they also think it's a natural problem. But, yeah, so the most non-Yiddish thing you could be what like literally could make you into a guy. And by the way, it's like halacha and Even HaEzer. Like if you see someone acting like that, you don't marry the experiment. That's what it says. I don't know what to tell you. It's like shash mamzeirim, shash goy. That's what it says in Shulchan Aruch. I don't know what to tell you. So that's a siman. Like siman is literal. Like a siman. If you see a family that they seem to be all the Rishonim, if you see a family that never put on tefillin for the last 200 years, whatever. But if they don't have, not like this, and it's really very serious mechila, right? Like they had a good reason to be mad, but they demanded like a blood carbon. Like, well, that's too much. Like, what's the gun? Like basically said this, it's going to help you to kill the guy's kids. Well, what's the point? It's a point. Biblical retribution. No, Yiddish is not Yiddish. So I wanted to say, I shouldn't say it on YouTube because they're gonna do this, but that's why there's a whole genre of Vertlich that goes like this. So that's for them. They need God to die in order to chap that this is a thing. But Yiddish didn't see Yiddish and Midden. The goyim are really left, so. Good to that, but he's very much like, it doesn't say like God is going to give you it's like a special thing. It's not Yid is meichel. Come on, and don't be action. Ask him mechila. If you don't ask him mechila, say whatever. You could send there's yotzim naklal. Like if you look in, that's not here, but another place. Like if he does a really bad thing, as much as shemra, okay, so don't be meichel, whatever. Not saying you're not saying something unnatural, but in the sense wherever it tends to be disproportionate. Yeah, be a man. Yid is like this. That's very natural theory of forgiveness. A very reasonable, very achievable theory of forgiveness. And if we go back and apply this to the God's forgiveness, it would seem to be that he doesn't think of God's forgiveness as something magic, something like a lot of Chiddush Sforim have, like the Mesilas Yesharim has chesed. Chesed Shiva is a chesed, or the Ben Yaina, it's a chesed, just English grace, right? And it's not grace, Shiva. And Yechezkel doesn't seem to have Shiva as a grace. It just seems to say it as a din. Of course, in the parak that's quoted in the Ila, I don't know which parak it is.
Because the different parak we'll talk about this parak of Ches. I got into this. The Ram brings it down similar thing with that from Yechezkel, that you do tshuva from your tzidkas.
Yeah, and then that's that.
Yechezkel was like you could be good and do bad.
Right.
It's the same thing. So
right, but that's
the Ram thinks it's important to bring down Achas tshuva. If you toil or shine, it's also you don't have it.
Right. We'll get to the. We have to think. That's always the kasha that the B'chaim Rasman asked on the Mesilas Yesharim. But it's a kasha from the pasuk. He's right. The Mesilas Yesharim is wrong. The teretz on this kasha that the Mesilas Yesharim is wrong. Man, why do you need a teretz? The teretz is that the Chesed he didn't think, but he also didn't think of Chiva. That's why he also didn't think of Chiva in the way that Mesilas Yesharim is thinking. He's not thinking of some amazing grace. Okay, there's a song, Amazing Grace. You don't know?
I know. I heard another song.
It's just about grace of God saving a person. Whatever. I was lost and I was found. Blah blah. Amazing grace. Okay. The point is, but in Yechezkel, but also he doesn't seem to have the. Yechezkel seems to be. We could talk about. He says some more things, but at least if you see it this way, the point is that it's we don't really care about what the past was. It seems to be a waste of time to worry about the past. That's what Yechezkel is sort of saying. You're tzaddik today. Yeah, I'm good with you. You're Rasha today. It doesn't help me that you're yesterday were tzaddik. That's basically what he's saying. Really, we're not even talking about Shiva in that sense. But even if you do one, he actually brings it out the other way around. I think. Not sure. But we don't even worry about. Okay, but that's another question. So we are really that can my akdama. So that's slicha and mechila and kapara and all these differences. Yeah, so it doesn't seem to be true. That's my thing. It doesn't seem to be like this is a chiddush. It does seem. That's what I would say. It does. The Rambam and the Zohar, they all would say that it does. It is a chiddush of the Torah. For example, this is where I get to the more interesting thing, which again causes people, or would cause us to think that there's something more mysterious going on. Because, for example, what is a chiddush of the Torah, right? So, just the idea of slicha, like Melad Lechavari would say, okay, like I said, where do we get this idea? Yisrael Lechmona, like it's a pusik, okay, the pusik is just based on Teva, right? Like I like the Tanya. Tanya says, Yisrael Yesh Lem Shalish Midas. That's not because of Nefesh Lekis. That's Nefesh Bahamas of it. And I like it, not, he wants something from it, I forgot what his point over there was, but it's like trying to say this is a natural thing. You got good chinuch or whatever, I don't know exactly. But then there's another thing, right? And they say the same thing about God. And like they said, there's minimal theories of God. Like we say something like this, like, okay, when we talk about God, we get into the whole problem of how to talk about God, so whatever. But the point is, If there's some obligations to whatever we exactly mean by Benedel Lamukah, some kind of obligation or some kind of thing, it's within reason, and it can be. And Yecheskel says something very simple, and he says something like, and Rama would also say something like this, and that's what I said in my book over there, that since everyone has problems, nobody starts off being a tzaddik. It was never expected of you. It's really basically expected. Maybe at the end of your life you'll be a tzaddik. That's how the world works, and fine. Like, there's no reason to get excited about you sinning. And Yecheskel says, I think the point of Yecheskel is making is that your mitzvahs, the are not saving you from being a bad person today, and vice versa. He's making a very Messianic point in a certain sense. Like, don't think that yesterday you're such a tzaddik that it's going to save you. Lo yatzileni, that's what he's saying. It's not going to save you. And the same way, why would yesterday's problems? We're not interested in yesterday. We're not interested in like having some.
They blame their fathers. That's what they're saying.
Yeah. There's a whole other. I know. I know, and I think that's a bad thing. Okay, that's why I'm not sure that Yecheskel is the best source for tshuva, because it seems to very much. Okay, the Rama says. But there's some sort of basic logic in this. Like, be real, be tachlisdik. Be as good as you could today. Why are you worried about yesterday and tomorrow and the day after and the day before? This is all irrelevant. And you couldn't see it. You could show it, like you're saying, you could show it from the other side very well. Like, people seem to very much want to save by their credit that they get. And credit totally doesn't help you. Like in human world, I don't know, again, you don't need to talk about maybe there's some Excel sheet where they keep track that you'll get schar for that. I don't think Yecheskel is even worried. It's not even a stira. The Gemara has a stira as a toil shad. That's where the problem got. What do you mean? It's a mitzvah yesterday. That's not what Yecheskel is bothered about. When you'll get them to heaven, God will give you a candy for yesterday. That's not the point. This point is, you come to me today, and whatever you do, you steal my thing, or you don't give me an aliyah or whatever, and you say, well, I'm such a tzaddik yesterday. I don't care that you're a tzaddik. It doesn't make any difference to me that you're a tzaddik. I'm asking you now to be a mensch. That's all. Don't know that. Same thing. And God saying, now it's very irrelevant. This is all extra cheshbon esrabim, like yesterday. And people, personally, people, it's like, and for themselves already have these problems. I'm just this guy kind of person, so therefore I'm not going to help myself or whatever. I'm not going to do a good thing. Well, that's all irrelevant. You're not helping. It doesn't help me. Just the mushal of that side helps very much. Like, what do you mean? How could you? I'm not going to accept you to yeshiva. But how you can't say anything bad because I'm such a tzaddik. I don't care that you're a tzaddik. Not relevant. Totally irrelevant. You're a tzaddik. Go to the bank of tzedakah where they pay for tzedakah and talk to them. I'm here I have a problem with you now, and don't tell me you're a tzaddik. And the same way. And if someone comes, what am I rishus? I'm not going to help you. Well, I'm asking you to help me now. I don't care that you're consider yourself a Rasha. It's not relevant. That's really what Yecheskel. Now that's extremely very down to earth thing. Most down to earth thing you say. You don't need to fast to get to that. So like nothing to do with nothing very spiritual. I think that's what he's saying. I mean, that's one thing he's saying. Like he's saying more things. He's trying to.
That just goes like tzaddik thing. It just flips back. And that's the
He's saying more things, but there's more context and the history and everything. But that's at least one of the things he's saying. So let's get to something more complicated. We talk about Yom Kippur, right? That's why we're here today. Because if there wouldn't be this like calendar which says Yom Kippur, there's Mechila, Slicha, Kapara, whatever, then we wouldn't be talking about it today. And that seems to be something that's at least slightly harder to make so simple, because as far as anyone knows, as far as the secular calendar is concerned, there's no difference between Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday this week. They're all the same days. And if you're a bad person on one of them, and the bank doesn't care, and the guy that wants your rent doesn't care, and your boss might care because you tell them it's religious freedom, you have to give me off, but we still want the same amount of work at the end of the month, and so on. So tachlis, nobody really cares. And what I mean to say is, does not seem to be a natural thing, right? Not a natural thing that in Kippur anything happens. At least, again, you could claim that it is. You could start saying, well, there's some hidden nature, if you would have known, so on. But that's a different level of nature. That doesn't seem to be a natural thing. And that's why many people say something like this. There's a Torah that goes like this, and it says in Hilchos Shkogas, and it's based on the Gemara over there, I forgot where, that says that Yom Kippur is only mechaper, it's not mechaper from Mimrim. That's really what the Gemara says. But then the Gemara says, Mimel Yom Kippurim. So if you don't believe in Yom Kippur is not mechaper. It says in the Gemara. It says in the Rambam and explicitly in Hilchos Shkogas, not in Hilchos Yom Kippur. But not gugus. They're not real afkamina, because if tomorrow you come and you say, well, I'll do tshuva, and on both you have to bring a carbon. And if you would have said yesterday that you're not a member, then you didn't have to bring a carbon. It's like a halacha. It's not a machshava.
The person comes after Yom Kippur. So
yeah, if you're a member Yom Kippurim, there's a whole discussion if Yom Kippur is mechapeh for member Yom Kippur. But that's, I don't remember the details of the sugya. But something like this turns out that if you don't believe in Yom Kippur, and maybe it means if you don't fast Yom Kippur, or maybe just the mevad Yom Kippur, that's like when it says mevad, because then it makes a difference. You're not fasting Yom Kippur, you're not fasting Yom Kippur also. That's good enough for that. It's self-referential also. But if you're like if you're bekoiris mevad Yom Kippur, then it's not mechap. That's the Gemara ends up saying. That's the Rambam calls maminim bekaperusay. So from this kind of language or from these kind of ideas, people end up with a thought that says something like slicha is like magic, it's l'mala me'tam v'das, and you need to believe in it. So in other words, really, and this is a big problem, because the definition of things you have to believe in to make sense as false things. Like, you remember the guy said reality is what doesn't stop existing when you stop believing in it. And if Yom Kippur stops existing when you stop believing in it, that seems a big problem. It's a problem. I don't like things like that. I would want Yom Kippur to work even for people who don't believe in it. If it works, or it doesn't really work, so what is the point? Right?
To believe in it.
So the point is, but it doesn't say only if you do tshuva. No, it doesn't. It does not. It explicitly says in Perek Aleph that it works even without tshuva for small avodas.
There's a story where this guy.
And he contradicts himself. If you look here.
If you do Yom Kippur, then you became a better person. You assume that you became a better person. The Rambam doesn't need every mitzvah to work for everyone either way. So for most people, if they sit through Yom Kippur or whatever, then they are better now.
You know the story with the guy who goes to the guy's house. He sees he has supposed to be some scientist. He sees he has like a rat hanging on top of his door. So he asks him, why do you have a rat on top of your door? He's like, I was told it, whatever. He's like, but you don't believe that these things work. He's like, I was told it works even if you don't believe in it.
Right, that's the nikeda. So then that means that it's real. That's just another way of saying it's real. But if it only works if you believe in it, there's like a weird thing where people believe that it's very real, but because it's so elevated or so high, I don't know what, then it only works if you believe in it. Like, if you're a guy, then Yom Kippur doesn't work for you. Why not? Maybe it should work for Goyim also. By the way, I have a fetish at that works for Goyim.
Money doesn't work if you don't believe in it, right?
I forgot. They had a fetish at pussy or something that it works for Goyim. I don't remember what it was.
See, there are things that the way you work is contingent on your belief, right?
What?
Money only works if you believe in it, right?
No, it only works if other people believe in it.
Okay, so...
I don't have to believe in it. I don't believe in money. It's still me to say. I believe that other people believe in it.
Right, I would say there has to be a general belief that it works.
It
still won't work for me. If somebody gives me money and I don't believe that it gets them my car, I'm not going to give it to them, right?
No,
if somebody pays me, gives me money for my car, and I don't believe that this is money, it's monopoly.
Yeah, it doesn't make a difference,
I'm not giving
right?
them my car. No, it doesn't work.
Because you need the next at the grocery store believes in money and so on. What's the difference?
Okay, but I'm saying is that you can still have things that you
require. But we could ask it internally to a belief. Really, we don't really need this to go this far. You could just say, what do you actually believe when you say that Yom Kippur is mechaper? Right? I'm just clarifying that there's a question here by showing you that if you don't believe, it seems to not be work. Or if you're a guy, I did find a source. I have to find it now. It was last year. Go guy Fashtai. I don't find it now. Anyways, everything is for Goyim, so I don't remember. Don't remember the Makar. Which year was last year? 21? I don't know how to find it. Not possible to find things here. Okay, but Kitzur HaMasa is that this is a baya. And it's such a baya that I'm pretty sure, I know that some people who are very not happy with their naturalistic or naturalization thing of tshuva and everything, very much focus on this kind of thing. and say that this shows us that whatever mechila is or whatever slicha happens doesn't have anything to do with what the Rambam thinks it has to do and people like him. And basically, another way of saying it doesn't have anything to do with Shiva. Although there might be a Tanait, that's a very big difference. Remember, there's a very big difference from what the Mishnah says and what the Rambam says. The Mishnah says, Im Kippur Mechaper, V'yesh Omrim, She'yesh Tanai. Only if you do Shiva, it's Mechaper. But it's like a Tanai in the... It doesn't say the word Tanai, but that's the Mechlei Rebbe said it was Mechaper, yeah. Im Kippur Mechaper, El Be'el Shiva. It doesn't say that. The Rambam literally says that Shiva Mechaper is. As one of his, then he changes.
It says the Shavim, right?
Yeah, right. But the second before it says Hachiva Mechaperes, and then it says Yom Kippur Mechaper L'Shavim. It seems to be redundant, this whole Yom Kippurim. Because Shiva is Mechaper for everything. But man is Shiva Mechaperes L'Akol, the Yom Kippur Mechaper L'Shavim. So thank you very much. Like, what's Yom Kippur doing for me? Shiva Mechaperes L'Akol Averes. That's what it says here. And then it's Yom Kippur Mechaper L'Shavim. But yeah, so this is a baya. In other words, and especially the fact that it's Yom Kippur and not the day before and the day after, seems to show. And like the Kuzari seems to say things like this: that you can make your own Torah, like just based on reason or based on whatever you decide, but it's not going to tell you when Yom Kippur is going to be. And that shows that the Torah is either just God's will or at least some kind of different higher nature that's not what the rationalists think it is. So what's the teretz? No, first that's one teretz that it's not. Another teretz is
whether it's not.
No, it's magic, but we have to explain. Well, magic needs to explain also, so it doesn't help much. But I can tell you the Rambam's teretz, and then it's explicit in the Rambam. Because it's explicit in the Rambam how we understand it. But I need to find a good quote. The Rambam says things like this. But what is it? You could ask this question. Like he does, like you said, he does seem still to say these contradictory things. If you do tshuva, Yom Kippur is mechaper, and then it calls the chalik kapara on smaller virus it's mechaper, and on a bigger virus, and so on, which ends up seeming to say the same thing. Like it says the Torah Mishtalech. It says at least the first Torah Mishtalech is explicit in the Rambam that it's mechaper on smaller virus without doing tshuva. It says beferish. And he seems to apply the same thing for Yom Kippurim. He tries to deny it, but in Perek Aleph it says beferish in the Rambam. This is the Gemara. It's not like it's based on that Gemara that I was telling you in Shvius, I think. I don't remember where it is. It says Im le'azat shiva and esem mechaper l'alakalis. But for smaller virus, so much lech helps, even without doing tshuva. For bigger virus, you basically don't need the so much lech. So, like if you do tshuva, so it doesn't seem to. There seems to be definitely some level in which he thinks that this works, and I think that it works also. So basically, this is a very big problem what we're doing here because we're ruining it, because it's going to stop working. But like I told you earlier, it's not clear to me that it actually works this whole thing anymore, or not enough. So might as well do it, because my kids didn't believe me that they're going to have to go make another kapara after the virus. Remember? So the Rambam in Perek in Chele Gimel Perek. Let me show you Perek. That's not there. And Chele Gimel Amar Nevach in Perek Mem something talks about this Tzora of Yom Kippurim.
Where is this?
Perek Mem Vav. Okay, Chele Gimel Perek Mem Vav. Next time I'll put it.
Seems to say that tshuva is what causes the kapara.
So the Rambam sort of explicitly says, right. So yeah, that's the shayla. That's the shayla. It's not only a shayla in the Rambam, but just using the Rambam to sort of figure this out. In some sense, everyone believes something like this. Like there's, in some sense, you say, well, if you don't do it, or if you're makibli, you say, don't do the kavanahs. What's the difference? And then you say, well, you should do it in the correct day, or maybe this day isn't working. It's a simish le'amachape. What does that mean? So let's start something like this. Number one, and they quoted the Rambam Perek Lamed Vav. Perek Lamed Vav Chele Gimel. This is only Chele Gimel. And Chele Lamed Vav says that Shiva is one of the. This is important because Shiva is one of the opinions or des, which translates as opinions. That without that there would be no religion. And his language is related to Stadam is Ism Shal Neshama B'nei Torah. B'nei Torah he means religious people, not necessarily the Jewish Torah. And he says because people make mistakes. That's actually his language. Make mistakes. Torah. In both in intellectual mistakes and mistakes in virtue, because he explicitly describes all in all medesras as mistakes. Like you think that it would be good to be mad now, but it's really not good. So it turns out to be always a mistake. It's not really. It doesn't really have a theory of like there's just like badness, some kind of badness. That there's still a theory of virtues really. It's always going to end up being something in your mind more than something anywhere else. And therefore, and it says like this. This is the language that I hate the New Translation. What does Ibn Tibban say? He says like this. This is the Rambam says why it's important. Then the Rambam, this is why we discussed this. Right? This is why I put the Cheshiva and said that Torah. It says if we would believe, and so on. It would have been become worse. Because the point he says, if people would not believe, and he says very weird because you would expect to say people would not believe that God will forgive them, and he never talks about that. He just ignores that. He says people would not believe that it's possible to become better, and they wouldn't. It's true. It's psychological truth. It's a weird thing that it's that way because just try to become better and see if it works. Like what's this belief doing? But apparently it does something. And the Rambam was working with his conception of belief at least having a use, right? A usefulness. Beliefs, besides for being true, are also useful sometimes. And sometimes they don't match the useful ones and the true ones. But in any case, there's at least a level of analysis of belief where you think of is it useful to believe or helpful? And there's a level of truth, which are two different things. Like a lot of true things are not useful in any way. They're just true. And some not true things are useful also, but at least in some level of emotional or whatever. But he's talking about the usefulness of believing in Shiva, not about the truth of it, right? Mm-hmm. It's also true, but he's not talking about that. And if you have this, because it's true that you can become better, like I was saying. If it wouldn't be true, then it would be useless to talk about it, because it wouldn't help anyways, right? He's not trying to trick you into getting better. He thinks that you really could get better. But he thinks that if people would not, so it turns out that what he's doing is really talking about slicha. Mm-hmm. Because that's the thing that people believe that helps them become better, actually. That's that belief, right? God being Salechi is not true. It's definitely not literally true because God never was mad at you and never changes his mind and so on. So all these things are definitely not literally true about God, although they might be true in some more abstract sense. But when he says that people, and he says it in the correct way because he's trying to get closer to the truth. When he says people need to believe that they can become better, they can fix themselves, or so to speak, or complete themselves. What he's talking about in the level of belief, right? Because that's just a fact. It's not really a belief. What he's taking when there's any belief here, or any like mushal he's giving, or any imagination that he's giving you, the imagination is that God's going to forgive you, and he's very clear that that's an imagination. God being mad at you is a good imagination. It'll give the people. It's helpful to people to think that God is mad at them when they make mistakes, because people are like that, and it's helpful to them believe that God's going to love them again when they stop making mistakes. Which is why he has a whole perek to talk about how God's going to love you again. And this is very clear, and the most clear place that he talks about is in Perek Mem Vav, where he talks about the Sur, which is this whole Perek is really the Perek Aleph, the second half of Perek Aleph in the Cheshiva is turning around the Sur HaMishtalech. And he says something like this. He says, he gives a whole theory of Kabbanas Shalachat. There's a general theory of Kabbanas, but then he goes into details, and he says that all Kabbanas Tarchatas, all different kinds of Kabbanas Achat, are basically reminders of doing tshuva. And he gets into a lot of detail, where he shows that if the bigger the avera is, the more tshuva you have to do. And this is the whole thing of kalas and chamuras. By the way, this is where he tells you what he thinks that really means. And he sort of says, he doesn't actually give a definition of why some things are more chamur and more kal, but I think that he says, I think that he would think something like, there's not so hard to understand. There's some things that are more worse things. And I really, basically, what I understand is that averes kalas are things that are only bad in the Shulchan Aruch, and averes chameres are things that are bad for real. There are some things that are only bad in Shulchan Aruch, but they're also bad for real. For example, things that have kodesh, and kodesh is a category of things, most of them that are religious problems, but they also cause bigger problems. Like, for example, not fasting Yom Kippur is a kodesh, although it's totally a mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah sichlis in any sense, right? Like I was saying, fast a different day. Even if fasting is a good thing, fast a different day. But the point is that fasting Yom Kippur teaches you that you could do tshuva. And doing tshuva is a very important thing. So it's a second-hand, very important thing. That's why kodesh is not a real thing. The Rambam's, I don't know if he says that, but the Rambam's language about kodesh is in a different perek, in perek Mem Aleph, I think. Is he tells there's a category of chatum that are kodesh, and he always says things that the level of Kurus is things that we believe that you get Kurus. He always adds this, we believe. Or he says Kurus is things that you get Malchus. Basically, Kurus, you get Malchus, along with believing that it's a very bad thing. That's his exact words. And I don't know what that means. Basically means that the Kurus is there at least to teach you that this is a really bad, take care of that. That's why, like I said, Chometz Pesach, I think they're not in themselves very important.
Criteria for what kind of consequences are Kurus and what are not? It has to have societal
He gives, but they're very ad hoc because nobody has a good theory for this goes back to you can't make up your own Kuruses. The Rambam has a real definition of Kurus, which is not this. You have to remember. He thinks that Kurus means not going to Elam Haba. But that's not the Kurus Shabbat Torah.
That's we use it as a mashal that it's like a thing that goes to the heart.
Possibly, but he doesn't think. But to be very clear, he doesn't think that if you eat a Yom Kippur, you're gonna not go to Elam Haba.
I'm saying we say it that
he thinks that it might lead you to that. It might lead you to that, which is right, or closer to leading to that than just if it's not putting on tefillin. If it's esveshav, don't put on tefillin tomorrow. Basically, that's what it's saying. There's nothing to be moichel you. Okay, so you need Yom Kippur. That's just because that's what Yom Kippur is telling you. Go, just put it on tomorrow because nothing happened. Basically, but if you killed someone, that something happened. Or if you didn't eat Yom Kippur, then something more bigger happened. And that's why...
If there's more core...
So what are you saying? So what's the answer to this in Kippur?
So wait. And then he says, in Perek Mem Vov, he talks about the Sodom Shtalech. So for him, all karbonas shalachet are really don't do anything real. He says very clearly, People believe that chatas is mechaper, and that's helpful. So this is very weird because I can't really get into this. And then he talks about so much and he says, well, it says in the Torah it carries the chatoim, and he says, well, you crazy? Nobody thinks that chatoim can be carried. Oh God, all these are all. He says like this. I'll have to read the language from here because I can't the Rambam says nobody believes what it says in the pasuk. The pasuk says I mean, that's not true. Nobody thinks that's true. And he says, "Kavonas kol eli apelos liyashev b'nefesh kol chayt." No, the next part. Where is it? Where did he talk about then? It's him later. Yeah. Sheyamabash, listen to the Strefes Alechatos. Kasher is Tom Shlech Lachbaris Chatom Gedoylem Kilam V'chle Kilin Eskal Chatom Lepneizel Neitzel Zicha V'ain Sofek Lodam Shechatos Chatom Enem Asros Sheyat Ki Megav Ish Echad Legav. Everyone knows. There's no doubt that sins are not like things that you could put from one person to the other. Aval Ela Amasm Kilam Misholem Lovi Moira Benefesh Achet Espayel Tshuva. Kloimar Shekol Ma Shekodem Masayin So he has this image like this, that the sword, which is described as taking the chatoim and dumping them in the midbar, is what you should be doing. That's all a mushal for what you're doing. Now the Rambam is not crazy. This is where I'm getting into the problem. We'll finish with this. He's not crazy. That's not what we tell the people. And he doesn't tell the people that, because in Yad HaChazak it doesn't say that. It says that this is going to be mechila. It's not that this is going to tshuva, right? But he understands, and this is why I shouldn't be saying this because it ruins it. But he understands that by telling people that you are now absolved, imagine, we tell them and they're imagining it. We're not to say the word imagine. The word imagine is only helping the people that are afraid that it's literal, so we tell them imagine. But everyone else is just imagining it without telling it, right? Tell him this is your chet, and it's going on the sword, and the guy is dumping it away. And then when you tell the person that, it makes it possible for him to actually do that. So he doesn't have to. I don't think he means, and I think that's why it stopped working, because we stopped doing it correctly. And it doesn't work when you say that it's a mushal. Okay, thank you very much. Now another mushal. I knew right before that tshuva. What's the point of that? I don't think it's supposed to work like that. I don't think the Rambam understands it to work like that. Like if you go to the Ramban quote this and others, if you go and say we do the Shalom Shalach, imagine the Kangudl would give this drasha for Yom Kippur. There would be no crowd anymore. Okay, I got it. It's a mushal. Thank you very much. The only way it works is when you tell them, no, we're taking your sins and doing it. And by doing that, it works. After people believe, like it says in Perek Lam, if you believe that God is Moichel you, that helps you do tshuva. Because that's the strongest way to tell a person that, look, you can actually, that's really what's lichila. And however you touch it up, however you explain it philosophically, what happens in Shemaim when you do that. Whatever the fact is that people get it, they get it. Okay, I've sinned the whole year, and now it's stopped to exist, those sins. They're all dumped in the midbar. Okay, so now you could say I've got a fresh start. I don't even think that. Now my sins are far from me, right? They're not in my mind. Now it's possible to get away from them. They're the same thing in my mind. But if you start telling them it's a mushal that you should do tshuva, this mushal is very shvach mushal. Man, there's better mushal. Like whatever, it's useless. It doesn't help. I think it only helps by believing that it's machapa. And that's really why Yom Kippur is only machapa if you believe in it. Not if you believe in it and you do tshuva. That's ruining it. That's making you like in a film. Like you're breaking the fourth wall. You need suspension of this belief. It doesn't work otherwise. And thankfully, most people are not smart enough to realize that And if you believe that God is meichel you, then you will do tshuva. It's just as direct as that. If you say, no, I don't mean that your avodas are going, then you're ruining the mushal. You're not only ruining, you're not actually helping anyone by saying, well, what do you think your avodas are on the goat? Hello, you want the guy to think there is avodas on the goat. And you want us to think, I'm not talking about any guy. Because this is all helping understanding by doing tshuva, and we do vidya. The Rambam says that vidya Yom Kippur is the same effect. The Rambam understands vidya also as not doing anything real. God doesn't listen to your vidya and say, okay, I'll be meichel you. The vidya is just to get into your head that there's such a thing as I sinned and I will stop sinning. Say it enough times until you believe that such a thing. It gets into you can imagine such a story happening. Like there's Yom Kippur and it's and all your sins stopped. But you have to actually imagine it. If you don't actually imagine it, what's the point? You're being very smart and know that it's not true. It wasn't not supposed to be true.
Imagine.
What?
Maybe just for me, it's not the hardest thing to imagine.
No, it's not. And if you believe the Torah, it's definitely good.
Well, they turned white. He did a good
Yeah, that's
job.
that. I want the that you should say. That you should say. No, I really want the. Yeah, of course, whatever. Yeah, of course.
Always turn
The point is, probably the whole year he had them on the right track, and what it means is that they mamish were there and they thought about what was happening. Like, our avodas are gone.
Of course.
Therefore, it turns white. So.
Of course. I had even a makar for such a pshat once, and I remember that my friend sent me a makar for something like this. Because of course, like if you're a rationalist or something, nothing ever turned literally from red to white. But somehow people believed that, however exactly it worked. And yeah, that's a great thing. Because that means then you believe that it could happen, and then they've stopped happening. Then basically people stop believing that, then there's no use, and that's why we start telling them no, it's simultaneously machapa, and that's why I think it's very important to believe that you don't have to do tshuva, because this whole thing that you have to do tshuva ruined it. And the Rambam was very worried that people will rely on it. It's fine, let them rely on it. That's going to make them better. It doesn't make anyone better saying don't rely on Yom Kippur. And people they hold echte voshev, all these things, they don't help anyone. Did anyone do more tshuva because of that? No. Right? Doesn't help. It only makes people stop doing tshuva. The Rambam thought he's helping, he's right, whatever. Maybe you have to always remember what helps. It doesn't help. If it doesn't help, that's also not true. Like, what's the point of that? So you have to believe. You have to imagine your sins going there. Like, you can imagine someone creating such a practice nowadays if you go to one of these meditation retreats. You're like, they actually did that. And things similar to that. You're like, and by the way, like as a therapy, right? You can go to some therapist, I'll tell you. Now imagine that you put your depression into this bag and I'm burning the bag. And it works. Does it work? Yeah, it worked. The guy got not depressed anymore, right? What does it mean? Was it really in the bag? No, it wasn't in the bag. Who cares if it was in the bag? In his imagination, it was in the bag, right? And it was in the bag. It got the depression into the bag and it went away from him. If you can get a sin into the bag and get away from it, that means it's going to stop the sin. That's not. It's not. The people aren't people. Anyone that talks about sin is not only worried about God's bank account. Is the sin is not there anymore? Okay. Now, of course, you could make that into okay. So now I could start again to sin. Okay, so don't be stupid. That's what the Mishnah is saying. Don't but if you break the fourth wall, then it stops working, and that's why I'm very critical of the Rambam for telling people too much about doing tshuva Yom Kippur. Because he should have told them that it works by 1,000. He did, and he did say that also, and that's how it's supposed to work. It's not supposed to work by this is a mashal and the Mishpura says something like that by Kapuras, right? B'mizbayin and says Mishpura, I think. The Kapura doesn't, and either Mishpura or one of these very achrayim that tells you should do Kapuras and you should think that you really deserve to be shechted like the chicken, and instead I never saw anyone working for anyone. I think the people that it works for, the people that believe that they're putting their avodas on the chicken, and then they stop. If for 10 minutes my gid was better. Okay, so it worked for 5 minutes. I don't know.
Sure, bought his chickens already. He doesn't want to buy chicken with avodas. I'm not sure. I can't look it up. Maybe that's why it's important that they made a yom tov and they were happy afterwards.
Or he wants to eat a avera-free chicken.
He doesn't want. Yeah, sure.
Good for him.
Maybe that's why it's very important that the Kohen Gadol was happy and made a yom tov.
No.
That's important.
Yeah, very important. It's probably more important than the thing itself. I think so.
To be happy afterwards. Like,
Yeah, you have to really believe in it. Otherwise, what's the point?
It's an important part of like the Mishnah. So afterwards, it was happy.
I'm asking. Yeah, I think that it's a very important part of the process. I think that nowadays there's such. I once wrote a whole article about this. In Yiddish, I remember that I wrote something about the Goyim for Yom Kippur, and I don't find it. But I remember that there's a thing that oh, here I found it. It's not my pshat. I'll tell you. There's a thing where you say Ozgepot al Skitz or something like that after the thing. Gepot al Skitz. After Yom Kippur or something like that, people say you should have worked it. What's the point of that? If it worked or it didn't. The point is that it worked. So this is the diak. Some yid called Shari Usher or Shari Usher, what a parish in the Rambam, and it said, in Sefer HaChinuch.
Yeshiva education doesn't help because they teach you one more krechts on Yom Kippur and you could have done more and
exactly, that's very bad. That's very bad. It doesn't help.
That, yeah.
This whole, I have a mother, I could speak about this more like practically, I'll just say the whole shir, but it doesn't help. This whole, it should be better, doesn't help, doesn't make anyone better. It makes them worse. Okay, so this yid was Madaik, that the Rambam says on Yom Kippur, and he gets mechila v'slicha li Yisrael. Mashma, that's for Yisrael. But the Sefer HaChinuch talks about Yom Kippur from Brias HaOlam. The Piyutim go with it. If it's from Brias HaOlam, then it's also from the Goyim.
Into this, right? So that's why
and it's a medrash. Adam Rishon, right? Adam Rishon was it, but that's the medrash probably. And I wrote that if you read a lot of Piyutim, like Ata Kananta, and the video of Neila talks about Enish, doesn't talk about Yidden at all. Ata Avdalt Enish Medrash. So obviously, Goy can say also that filler, right? Works. Not even a Shalav of Hisani. So that anyway, this was this year's diak that Sefer HaChinuch holds that Yom Kippur is also for the Goyim. Actually, the Rambam is probably trying to say what I'm saying, that it's if you're Yid, after the Yom Kippur. If not, find something else, whatever.
Would you say also that the Rambam he's just now getting back to the Yid and the Goy thing? The premise is that we mean Yid and whatever. That's the premise. Whatever. A Yid, whatever. The premise is doesn't work for what we said. The Torah was given because it didn't work for everyone else. So the starting premise is that only people who get this are going to work. Obviously, you want to know if someone theoretically get a Seder. But the premise is that no, it's Yid and whatever.
No, well, not. What do you mean by the premise?
It's not inherent that it's dafka for a Yid could get Olam Haba, let's say, right? But the premise is that people don't get Olam Haba except if we help them out, so we give them the Torah. So we're saying that people who have the Torah are the ones who are going to do it. Doesn't mean we're not really excluding everyone.
No, it doesn't.
The idea of what happens.
The Torah doesn't ever exclude everyone. It doesn't say such a thing in the Torah.
So if we ever use this language of a Yid gets Olam Haba, we're just trying to say some a Yid does Olam Haba, not inherent.
No, the Rambam is going off to the Sefta that says a fetish, and that Mishnah, it's machlokes in the Sefta, and he passes at least like the shit that says that Chassidim Yisraelim also. Kol Yisrael just means all Yisrael, because that's how the Rambam would understand it. That the point of the Torah is to make all of them, not only a few of them.
Itself is saying some Yisraelim don't have, because like whatever those didn't do the thing that we assumed that it would do.
Yeah. But they would say something like Kol Yisrael, not Kol Yisraelim, the Chassidim Yisrael. That's why Yisrael has to be a Chassid. He can't be a tzaddik. There's something in that language, in the sense of he's doing something special, because it's not in his society. Imagined as not being a society that has Torah, it's hard to be a Torah person.
We don't expect him to do it.
Right.
Even his environment.
The Torah. His environment is not supportive of it. Because you have to be Socrates. You have to fight with everyone. Which is how the Rambam sees it. No, really. Yeah. And he sees it that in Judaism you don't have to fight with everyone. Turns out you do. But he thought that you don't. In some sense you don't, because...
At least we're meichel each other. At least we're
exactly, we should. We should at least be meichel each other.
We try to be.
Yeah. We should be at least Rachmanim giving the Chassidim. Yeah, I think that's the big thing.
Actually, it's a common theory. We find this language of like the Rambam.
Also,
every time the Rambam excludes, like says Yisrael, he just means like whatever. In my book that I'm.
No, it could be the opposite. It could be that he's meaning to say here when he's being explicit, he's saying that it's only for Yisrael. In other words, when it says Yisrael, it might mean that a goy doesn't need it. Doesn't mean that a goy doesn't get to it, and it might be actually useful. I want to say that there was a yid. I think he's a yid. His name is Alan de Botton. He made a TED talk. And his thing was, he wrote a book called Religion for Atheists.
Yeah. There's a church also.
Yeah, it works this kind of church, weiß ich nicht. But his idea was that atheism is obviously true. Why? Because his father told him. That's what it says in the beginning of his book. It's amazing. I love it. Messiah. Man tate gen atheist, man sayde gen atheist, atheist, was wisst. Ich kann schade. But he did figure out that religions have a lot of useful things. Or good things. And why we being Meshiga and not going to church every man? I'm bored. Or we're going to play games. So he was trying to go around in all the religions and pick out the good ideas that they have. And everyone should do that anyways. So it's interesting, like which things he found in each religion. I don't remember what he found in the other ones. But one of his Jewish religion things was, I think he's technically Jewish, this guy. But one of the things he said was religion. What? That one of the things that he said was that Jews have this Yom Kippur thing, where once a year everyone says they're moichel each other, and they say God is moichel them, and it's the greatest invention, one of the great Jewish inventions, and he wants to make like a secular Yom Kippur practice. So I thought it is a good practice. That I wrote about the Rambam once. Even for B'nai L'Chaveret, it's very useful. Like this is a good example of showing how it's useful. And not true, but useful, right? Because you say Yom Kippur is B'nai L'Chaveret, and then we could ask. So, are you asking your friend Mechila because you want to get back on good terms with your friend, or because you worry that God will be mad? Okay, because you worry about God. But Tachlis, it helps you with your friend also, right? Now, why didn't you do it the week before? Like, what's the point?
Because you need one day here.
Exactly, because otherwise it would never happen, right? Like the Rambam would say, what about it? And the Rambam would tell you, why is it Yom Tishrei and not Yom Taivus? You know what? Do it on Yom Taivus. What do I care? It has to be on some day, right? But this being on some day, in the particular sense, is a great thing. Because now you have an excuse. You could say, look, it's Erev Yom Kippur, and if you're like Haredi Jew, you have another excuse. I have it at Surah, and I think it's because of you. Achlo, it's not my fault. Once, someone last week someone came to me and had some stupid fact, and it came and I have some, whatever, I have sickness, and I was thinking, yeah, probably, thank you, I sent that to you, yeah. why would I take it away? How much you're paying me to take it back? Like, what's this all about? Well, the point is, it gives you excuses to, that's a useful thing.
Yeah, no, I had a coworker who wanted to. I told her I don't use my phone one day. Whatever. She's like, oh, I'll do it also on Saturday. It's like, you can do it Monday too. She's like...
Yeah, but no. You have to do it on Saturday.
Yeah, then I realized...
And you have to have chiv skilla if you don't.
Yeah, she's
otherwise.
Like, no,
otherwise it doesn't work. Without the chiv skilla.
Yeah.
That's why I don't think the religion, the atheist church has any mispaulim. Because like nobody's killing them if they don't come. And it doesn't work.
Can I suggest one quick thing about the Rambam?
Sure.
The Slicha. There's an element of Averis, right? There's this very natural idea of Averis, and then there's also just what it does. So, for example, when you bother your friend, you made a tear in the social fabric. So maybe Mechila is trying to fix that as much as possible.
Right, but the thing is, he doesn't believe that really exists, and for social fabric maybe it's also like a metaphor because there's no fabric, right? But
it's the effect of the Averis.
I know, but the thing is, you say that, you could say that, and actually I forgot that was another whole shit that I wanted to say.
When the guy sleeps with the lady, then
the weird thing about that is that it's not a chesed. I wanted to say that, that's another whole shit that I want to say. That's not Nechas Shiva. The Rambam definitely believes, like, forget about Mitzvah Averis, right? The Rambam has the Nicomachean ethics, you know? And the ethics has this idea of a second nature, right? The Teva Sheni, it's called Mitzvah, which is basically Regilus, right? Habit, right? And Aristotle literally defines this virtue as a habit, right? If you're, not a Gemel Chesed, what does that mean? It just means that you tend to do that. You do that a lot. And how do you get to that? By practicing it, right? Maybe you could be warned a little bit, but you have good education and so on. But that's all just ways of practice. Mostly by practicing it, right? That's why you get the Hakol Fireve Mas and so on. So, and what this means, it means it's true. It's also somewhat metaphorical, but it means that because the second nature is not like really a nature; it's only like as if a nature. But it means that when you do a good, and if you take abstract mitzvah Averis, it's not mean commands. You make mitzvah Averis as good things and bad things. Then, when you do a bad thing, besides for that bad thing, and that's not really what we're worried about, because doesn't care about that. Really, only cares about the effect. and then you also became slightly a worse person. And then, then they have Hol Chazdayas, where you have to go to the other extreme to become a better person. And this is the weird thing, because that's really the Rambam's theory of Tshuva. And this is, I've realized today that it's very weird that Hol Chazdayas, not the Hol Chazdayas, I forget which parak, a specific parak which talks about this. He called in Pnei Parak and Parak Beis, the Refuas HaNefeshos, right? The healing of souls. Healing of souls is literally the Rambam's, should have been the Rambam's Hilchas Tshuva, and it's not in Hilchas Tshuva. I don't know why. It should have been, and I did find two places in Hilchas Tshuva. I mean, one in Hilchas Tshuva, one in Moed, where he talks about Tshuva, where he references Hilchas Dayas. In the end of Perek Dalet, he goes, "Kvar kasafti b'Hilchas Dayas, komin edvarim a lot of things that everyone should do, befrat about tshuva. And then in Perek Mem Vav, where it goes through the demos of each carbon, how it's showing you how to do tshuva, and he says, as I've explained better in Hilchos Da'as. So he does think that if there's really a theory of tshuva, in that sense, it must be that theory of like the whole theory of the balance and going back to the other side, and that's how to actually do tshuva according to the Rambam. And Hilchos Tshuva doesn't talk about this, and I think it's a weird thing. I think it needs an explanation.
But he's trying to uphold the.
He definitely, for example,
it can be spread in a holistic way too. Right?
Yeah, but
people just like think they could just walk this make this tummy, right? They just get used to it. So now they like, no, we're gonna try to like get rid of this.
Yeah. That's definitely true. So the Ram definitely has in that chapter. He definitely has the thing of you have to bring a big carbon to make people still remember that it's a big chet. Not only about tshuva, it's also like about like the how do you call it? Like the harta'ah. How do you I forget English. Right? That the manishmer viroi part of anshin is also in tshuva also. Right.
The Maimonides understand. They're going to somewhat get over all these effects that they have to.
Like we need to tell you, if you do this, you're going to have to fast for 40 days. And that's why you're going to realize that it's a serious thing. And if you don't fast, then you're not going to realize, so you're going to have to actually go through it and fast. The Rambam definitely probably thinks that fasting, I mean, he says this always explicitly in where he talks about Yom Kippur, in Perek Mem Gimel, that the reason we fast in Yom Kippur is some kind of, because the Rambam doesn't believe in fasting. And the Rambam quotes actually the Zechariah about fasting over the Shemona Perukim, where he talks about asceticism as being a bad thing because it's just going out of balance, but he does have place for it because it's supposed to lead you to Emes V'Shalom, which he's talking about Yom Kippur also, the Navi, right? So obviously understands fasting, and the Rambam also understands fasting Yom Kippur as some kind of precious. It says Beferish and Perek Lamed over there. In Mem Gimel he talks about Yom Kippur, and in that Perek in Mem Vav he says if your chet is b'machshava, like you had a mistake in knowledge, then what you have to do is learn a lot. And also he says, very interesting thing, don't jump to conclusions, because the Rambam was very worried. Apparently that's his big thing. That's another whole shit. Not to think that you know things that you don't know, because that's what leads to people. That is pshat in Yetzer B'Shalom. Yetzer B'Shalom is if you don't know something, just say I don't know. Even if it's very important, because it means even if you don't know that there's a God, just say I don't know. It's better than saying there is a God. Or Chidush Olam, he's talking about Chidush Olam apparently. But that's his tshuva. And Yom Kippur, he's supposed to do that. Like things that you don't know, just realize that you don't know them and say that you don't know. And that's why you don't need, so you have time, whatever the Ram believes in asceticism, at least in that sense. Like we have time to think or to do you say vidui and so on. But it's definitely part of that, like moving to the other direction. And so that's
I'm saying even this, like even for like how does it clean the Beis Hamikdash? You do the Beis Hamikdash, just start over from scratch. Everyone like whatever bad things people developed over the year about the Beis Hamikdash, like start over, like be careful again, like be careful at the Beis Hamikdash again. Just like whatever, I call external things that you develop from these averis. Maybe internally you want to know if you're closer. That's the other thing you're talking about.
Yeah, I forgot to talk. That also makes you closer. There's whatever. There's enough things. He actually talks about becoming closer somewhere. And that thing, in one of these places, it says something about. Because of the whole career Be'ez HaKodev, and Be'ez HaKodev, the Rambam explains very clearly in Chelek Aleph already, in Moira, that means knowing better. Anyways, so that's the thing.